we will proceed to the next session, which is the third session, and it is my utmost pleasure to welcome Professor Fukunari Kimura, PhD, as the Chief Economist of ERIA, Jakarta, and as a professor at Keio University, Tokyo. The time given for the session will be 20 minutes, with the title of the Value Chain Connectivity in Indonesia, the Evolution of Unbundlings. Professor Fukunari, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great honor for me to have an opportunity to give a talk in this kind of a really distinguished forum. I'm trained as a trade economist. So from that viewpoint, we will already have two really distinguished presentations, and we have existing issues and challenge issues and homework. And at the same time, we have new challenges and opportunities. So I share a sort of view that how we can approach to new businesses, new development strategies in newly developed economies and developing countries, including Indonesia. So, sorry, actually, I'm coming to Indonesia for more than 10 years, twice a month. So I have an apartment in Senayan, Jakarta too, but my Bahasa is nothing actually, so let me do that in English. Okay, actually in the history of international trade, we have a big technological breakthrough, and that made the way of international division of labor quite different. So we had a very famous book by Richard Baldwin. He's in a graduate institute of international affairs in Geneva, my old friend. He wrote a very famous book, The Great Convergence, 1.5 years ago. And I'd like to extend the idea there. So he proposed the concept of so-called unbundling, how we can unbundle economic activities across national border. So actually, it's by step, we have different technological breakthrough, then we have different kinds of international division of labor. So in order to see right now and also in the future, what sort of jobs can be done in, say, newly developed economies or developing countries like Indonesia. So, just keep it, yeah. So, starting from this, go to next, please. Next, please. Yeah, this is too small, I'm sorry, but actually, think of starting from some pre-globalized world. Basically, we are producing something that we consume in the same country. So it's not completely self-subsistence, but actually, the international trade portion was very, very small initially. But we had so-called transportation revolution. Starting from the beginning of the 19th century, we have steamships, railways, and those are carrying heavy stuff from one place to another at really cheap monetary cost. So this is a big revolution. So changing. Before that, we had pretty much self-subsistence economy, but now we have international trade. So one country is producing something, another country is producing something, then we have international trade. So this is a separation of production and consumption across national borders. So that is what he called the first unbundling. Many industries are doing this still. If you look at Indonesia, say starting from mining industry, palm oil, and probably garment, in kind of really slow, typical garment operation, usually pretty slow in delivery and slow in procurement. Those are belonging to the first unbundling. So many industries are still doing that, and if they are making money, then that's okay. But so coming into the new phase, the second unbundling, this is started maybe in the mid-1980s or early 1990s. particularly in the machinery industries, now we are fragmenting production process into small production blocks. That is called the fragmentation of production. So now we have the international division of labor in terms of production processes or tasks for some industries. So this is so-called second unbundling. That was possible because of ICT revolution. So if you think of changes in ICT technology between 1980 to 1990, in 1990 we had some primitive emails, internet, and also facsimile, and so the international coordination was much cheaper after that. So particularly in machinery industries, we have a lot of parts and components trade, not just a sort of raw materials and finished products trade. So this is a second unbundling world. Not all countries are doing this yet. Many ASEAN countries and East Asian countries are doing this. Indonesia probably partially doing this. Some part of Indonesia is doing this, say in the Jakarta area, and partially Riau Islands and Surabaya doing to some extent, but maybe we still have room for deepening the involvement in the second unbundling in this country probably. And then now another new wave is coming in. This, we call the third unbundling. Now we have further level of ICT revolution. So now the face-to-face cost reduced. So we can have B2C matching, C2C matching much cheaper than before. So before that we just had B2B connection, but now we can have B2C or C2C connection much easier. So that would make a lot of matching businesses on internet, and also maybe in the near future we would have even international division of labor in terms of persons in order to do one task. So still this kind of international division of labor would be quantitatively small, but you can think of the situation that in coming 5 years, 10 years, if you are working for some company right now, you have to go to office every day, but eventually you don't have to go to office every day. You can do some job at home to coordinate with your colleagues. So this is third unbundling. So eventually we would have this kind of international division of labor more and more, even across national border. So this is a sort of framework that Richard Baldwin proposes, and then beyond that is my imagination. I did not get the endorsement of his, but I think we can extend this kind of idea in order to think of what is needed a country like Indonesia. Next please. Next please. Skip it. Yeah, so let's take the first unbundling. Actually, still we are doing this a lot. Most of the developing world is really dominated by the first unbundling type businesses, and in Indonesia too, some particularly in islands outside of Java. Please. Next. Yeah. This is actually, we are checking Indonesian ports data. Indonesia has a lot of ports, more than 1,000. And out of that, 2,000 ports are doing international trade. Okay? But many are very small, as you can imagine. And also, we have some specific biases for some ports, that one port is just exporting basically, and another port is just importing. So particularly in the exporting side, here you can see starting from Tanjung Priok, Tanjung Perak, Soekarno-Hatta, this is airport actually. Then say Dumai, and Belawan, and then Bontan. So you see those are resource-based products exporting ports. So this is one indication that there's some sort of first unbundling type activities are really dominating. So we have some import specializing ports too. Next, please. So if you look at Indonesia, so the blue portion is a sort of combination of the first unbundling and second unbundling. But in the green portion, actually this is by provincial level, the international trade is more than 1% of total Indonesia. That's a sort of criteria. So you can see green portion, those are, many are doing, say, mining industries, plantation agriculture, and those kind of things. And the white portion, the international trade, their international trade occupies less than 1% of total Indonesian trade. So those are not quite connected to so outside directly, at least. So we have really huge areas under a sort of a pre-globalized world and also the first unbundling. So definitely there is a lot of room for step into a sort of higher level of say unbundling. So I think we, in order to do that, we need some institutional arrangements, physical connectivity, and also human capital, of course. But Indonesia is a big country. This is a half of ASEAN. So if you look at the rest of ASEAN, we have many centers, actually. So Indonesia has a very few centers, actually. So I think that there is a lot of room for expanding various kinds of new activities. Next, please. Checking the second unbundling, we can do a little bit more carefully in trade statistics. Next, please. So we have some expansion of, say, particularly imports of parts and components of machinery. You can see that after 2008, this is the development of automobiles particularly. But this is, that's going up and going down. So a bit disappointing in a sense of the trade values. Next, please. And also, this is coming from so-called trading value-added data. If you look at the right-hand side diagram, the vertical axis is the so-called backward participation index, and horizontal axis forward participation index. Roughly speaking, in international input-output table, saying backward participation index means that how far we are using foreign value added in order to produce our exported goods. So if you are in international production network deeply, then that index is going to be higher, and also you are relatively downstream in production. Then forward participation index, that means that our value add is used for foreign production. So this is roughly speaking foreign production forward participation index. So many neighboring countries are really upward, so high backward participation index, and also some are also high FPI. So that means that they are really deeply involved in international production networks and relatively in downstream of the production. But in case of Indonesia as a whole, still pretty close to Brunei. So you can see that we are exporting a lot of raw materials and really upstream middle products, but not really doing downstream yet. So this is an indication that still, particularly in the whole value-added chain in manufacturing, the lower part is still pretty thin in Indonesia. If we just look at the whole Indonesia. Next, please. But if you go to the port data, then if we check the machinery parts and components trade, not just values of trade, but number of parts and components times number of trading partners. This is sort of the extensive margin. So this is another indicator that how far we are coming into complicated, sophisticated international production networks. If you just count the number of parts parts and components exporting and importing, and also the number of trading partners, export destination, and also import origin. Those are increasing actually even in the past few years. So this is indication that so particularly in Jakarta, Surabaya, and also Riau Islands, we can see some changes, and also even in other small ports, still the proportion is very, very small, but we can see that the trade in parts and components trade is really started for some ports. So this is indication of new economic activities in outer islands. Next, please. So this is in horizontal line, we have countries, trading partners. This is the export side, export of machinery parts and components by Indonesia to trading partners. And you can see in Singapore up there, in vertical axis, this is a number of kinds of parts and components exported. In this classification, actually, we have 300 something kinds of parts and components. So we are exporting those many kinds of parts and components to Indonesia, Singapore. Then come down Japan, Malaysia, and others. Those are some major destination of Indonesian parts and components. Next, please. If you look at Jakarta only, this is actually both Soekarno-Hatta and also Tanjung Priok. But we have a little bit lower trajectory like that. Next, please. This is Riau Islands, Bintan, Batam. Basically, the trade is only with Singapore. So we just have a really simplistic production networks with Singapore and slightly Malaysia, but not quite with others. So a little bit shallow type of participation in production networks. Yeah. Okay. Next, please. So the Surabaya still like this. So I think still even in those regions, we would have a much deeper involvement in production network. The prospects for third unbundling, I think we had a really proliferation of various kinds of B2C, C2C matching. Social media, matching business, e-commerce, e-payment, and others. Then, next please. So if you look at the sort of whole development strategies of Indonesia, so certainly one way to do is step by step. If we can do 0, then we have to step up to 1, and if we can do 1, then step up to 2. Then once we can do 2, then go to 3. This is, of course, the best way to do, because we can expand the capabilities step by step, and that makes the market larger. So we have to put priority for this kind of strategy continuously. But at the same time, for some regions, some countries, we may think of some leapfrogging. Even if we do not have any industrial basis, that means 0, we could jump to, say, software outsourcing. That kind of leapfrogging could be possible, and also feedback of advanced technologies, using digital economy in traditional industries, like using smartphone in agriculture, and using ICT, Internet of Things to supply chain management. Then we could revitalize the old industries too. Next, please. So I think Indonesia, particularly, the 3 different levels of unbundling coexist. So certainly the strategy to expand the scope of unbundling, that actually expands the scope of business models. We have to think of that region by region. And we have to take advantage of particularly dispersion forces by communication technology, not just a sort of information technology like AI or Industry 4.0. That actually reduces the number of tasks, but communication technology overcomes distance, and then that generates dispersion forces. By using that, we have to expand the scope of jobs, but at the same time, we have to catch up with the advancement of information technology in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fukunari, for the very insightful session. So now we will proceed to the question and answer session, which will be held for 15 minutes. And we would like to highly encourage for students to actually propose a question regarding the topic of the value chain connectivity in Indonesia, the evolution of unbundlings. And again, with the 15 minutes in mind, we would also like to remind for everyone who would like to ask a question to make the question as concise and as simple as possible, because we have time constraint. Thank you very much. And for the students, which we highly encourage to ask in the session of the value chain connectivity in Indonesia, the evolution of unbundlings, we would like to ask for everyone who would like to ask for the 3 first questions to turn on the microphone, introduce your name, where you come from, and your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Fukunari Kimura, for your interesting presentation. My name is Nabil. I am from Economist Department, Universitas Gadjah Mada. As you mentioned in your presentation that Indonesia tried to expand the capabilities of unbundlings, but in the other side, we know that Indonesia industry is facing the problem of industrialization or premature industrialization. How can Indonesia try to address this problem? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Lydia Napikupul from the ANU Indonesia project. I was actually at the lecture where Professor Kimura presented this slides yesterday, but didn't have time for questions. I will ask you this. Do you think Indonesia has implemented strategies or policies that is strong enough so that this third wave of unbundling can be an opportunity rather than another missed opportunity? Thank you.
I was wondering whether the 2 speakers who are left now may have a question for each other, because there seems to be a significant overlap between your presentation and Professor Kimura's presentation. The only difference is that you did not use the term unbundling, but many of the things that you discussed in your presentation are actually what Professor Kimura identifies as part of the third unbundling. In other words, maybe part of the answer to the question of Lydia is related to your presentation. So it would be good to bring you into the answering of the question.
Yeah. For the first question, I think you are talking about the sort of early deindustrialization, or talking about the Industry 4.0. I was not quite sure about that. I think we can see a sort of indication that the same machinery industries are really improving now. And then the operation is not getting much more sophisticated right now in the past 5 years or so. So it was not so bad to do that. And also, so the industrialization story may not be applied for Indonesia, I think. But certainly as a new production technologies are coming in the wave of so-called Industry 4.0, and so that would change a sort of a demand for labor and also what sort of fragments of production can be done in Indonesia. So that kind of pattern could be changing very drastically. But probably once we have a new technology, then we should not be afraid of using that. And then if we need a replacement of labor from one place to another, and we have to really generate new jobs in new industries. So I think that's what we have to do in coming years. So my point is that in new technologies, I didn't explain that very in detail. So very roughly speaking, I don't know, this is a sort of usual way to do, but we have information technology and communication technology. So information technology is basically, say, represented by, say, AI, Industry 4.0, say the data processing is getting faster and we can make something much more efficient. So that actually reduces the number of tasks possibly. So that means that the extent of division of labor may be reduced in a sense. So eventually in this kind of story, all sorts of manufacturing activities may be done in Germany. Okay. So not in Indonesia, not in Japan. So that could be one possible scenario. But in the communication technologies, using internet, the smartphone and others, actually that really overcome distance. So we have a larger room for doing division of labor. So we have dispersion forces. So particularly from the viewpoint of newly developed economies or developing countries, certainly innovation is important, but the innovation at the really top of information technology will be very costly, very expensive. So you should do that, and you have to monitor what's going on in the world, of course, but maybe you cannot really create a very large portion of IT technology, but communication technology can be used, and that generates a lot of jobs, starting from platform businesses and also various kinds of applications. So definitely we should utilize that kind of technology. So when we talk about Industry 4.0, many people, particularly in developed countries, say that the technology will be very disruptive. So labor should move from should be kicked out from sort of working places. This is one aspect, but another aspect is that technology generates more room for division of labor too. So we have to utilize both in a kind of in a balance in order to think of sort of new industries. Lydia, thank you very much for the question. I think government's role is going to be very, very important. One thing is certainly a sort of background regulatory framework. Say, for example, data flows are very, very important in order to guarantee that those kind of businesses. So we like to have free flow of data, but at the same time, we are afraid of completely free flow of data. So certainly we need a bunch of backup policies for, say, consumer protection, privacy issues, and also competition policy if we have a sort of really huge platform firms like Google and Amazon, and also taxation issues. Still, we don't know how to tax for big platform firms, and also certainly cyber security. So we have a bunch of things that we really have to back up in order to make data flow free. So that kind of regulatory framework can be done only by the government, and I think this is extremely important. So this is in addition to, say, broadband access and others that the previous speaker talked about. And also, it's very difficult, but certainly we have to change the nature of human capital, education, and the job replacement, and those kind of things. Those are coming in, but it's a little bit complicated. But we should not give too much subsidy and too much distortion to the market. But certainly we need some sort of safety net, and also some, if possible, forward-looking education. I don't know how to do that, but those would be certainly a sort of very, very important job for the government. Yeah, so that's what I thought. So Pierre's question, yeah. So I actually I couldn't understand everything in her presentation because it was Bahasa, but I think she provided various examples, and so from my framework, maybe nice to have, say, IT and CT, and then in what sort of aspects we can make a sort of business in Indonesia. So in that sense, two talks will be very closely related, I think.
Yeah, actually, like I had mentioned before, that the government also have already tried to support it, and just IT and communication, and because also in terms of using communication technology, actually also support the also especially for the youngest, yeah, support the informal trade, and not just commerce, yeah, a lot of activity, economic activity conduct.
And also, you talked about, say, possible implication for inclusiveness for those kind of internet platform and others. Say, possibly small businesses, MSMEs, or maybe even individual consumer can get access to those kind of platforms. And so that is now possible because, let's say, face-to-face cost is getting very low. So that could give us some sort of implication for inclusiveness in the society.
Yeah, it's true. That's why also, because the ability of the technology, and also I has mentioned that more than 70%, even in rural and in the very level of local government, has the access of internet. So yes, it's true, and we are supporting now, and also for formal and of course the informal one. Of course, still a lot of problem because you mentioned like tax. Even if you expand economy, Japan still have problem. We are also still have problem with collect tax from this activity, formal or informally.
Poverty issues or the rural development. One side is, of course, we may have the problem of the digital divide, of course. But another side, by utilizing those kind of communication technology, we may have really new approaches for those kind of issues too. So I think that should be the way to go for, say, particularly for poverty issues, inclusiveness issues.
And that's why what I have present this morning, because I realized and we realized actually some ministers has already also provide some program, and they support for especially for the rural area inclusiveness, and for the just not small but micro level also business in Indonesia.
That is the end of our questions and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for the amazing panelists. Thank you very much for Professor Sri Adiningsih, PhD, as the head of Dewan Pertimbangan Presiden, Professor Arif Armida Alishabana, PhD, as the head of SDG Center, as well as Professor Fukunari Kimura, as the PhD, as the Chief Economist of ERIA, Jakarta. Please give them a round of applause for the amazing insights as well as knowledge that we have obtained today.